Welcome to the Holy Smokes Podcast, a show about faith, friendship, fine tobacco, and drink. I'm Steve Reiter in the Orlando area. Nice, beautiful day. Much more humid than I'm used to in Colorado. I'm in Eric Reinhold's backyard. We just moved off of Smoke on the Water to the backyard, and everyone's going to be eating. And I wanted to bring back Andrew Lawson onto the podcast because, Andrew, when I interviewed you and Eric 3 years ago, we talked about your stories, and then we talked about the Orlando chapter and how the Orlando chapter really got started and how it's been growing and all that. But we never got to rapid fire questions.
There you go.
And so wanted to bring you back on because I need to hear these rapid fire questions.
Oh,
and
geez, I'm not ready.
So, yeah, I wanted to bring you back on, talk a little bit about your story again for those that may have missed that and aren't going to go back. And then let's get to rapid fire. So, Andrew, you were a missionary kid in Brazil, right?
How crazy is that? Amazon of Brazil. Literally where stories are told.
Where in Brazil?
So the mouth of the Amazon, really there's, when everyone visits Brazil, or if anybody hears that I'm from Brazil, they keep asking me questions of literally all of the civilized parts. They've got some connection with Rio or São Paulo or something. Born and raised in Belém, which is the mouth of the Amazon.
Yeah.
Manaus and Belém are the really only two cities of any significance there. So that's where my folks worked, and that's where I was born. My older sister and younger brother were all born there.
How long were you guys there?
Through high school, through graduating in high school.
Really?
Yeah, so 17 years.
What was it like growing up there?
I mean, when you know...
Nothing else.
When you know nothing else, absolutely right. My memory of it was absolutely magical. I mean, in terms of just a singular, unique experience.
How big of a city?
It's a significant city now. So I left there in '87.
Yeah.
And obviously, like a lot of places, it's turned into something far more than it was then. I wouldn't even guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't been back since '88. Had a chance to go back first year of college just to catch up with my folks who were still working there. And they worked there for almost 40 years in that area.
What led them there?
So my parents are Scottish. So I've got a deep Scottish background. I have, other than obviously coming here to the U.S. for college.
Have you ever come to Holy Smokes in a kilt?
I have. There's pictures, there's photographic evidence of that. And I have several kilts.
My hat's off to you for...
There you go.
Were you full Scottish or American Scottish?
No. Literally, I have zero connection to the United States other than, and that's a longer...
No, I mean when you were wearing the kilt, are you going full Scottish or American?
Full Scottish. There's no other way. You don't go half-baked on that one. But absolutely.
That's funny. So, you came back to the States for college. How much of a culture shock was that for you?
Sizable, significant.
How so? Like, describe what it was like. Where'd you go? And
so I had an interest and a real inclination into aviation, flying, and had a very unsuccessful attempt to get into the Royal Air Force, the RAF. And given that did not get off the ground, my mom's memory of all of the jungle aviation pilots that she had conversations with, they had mentioned a few schools in the U.S., one of them being Moody Bible Institute, that had an missionary aviation program. And I kid you not, she showed me the acceptance letter because unbeknownst to me, she heard two things. She heard tuition free and she heard flying, and she applied for me, and I got an acceptance letter to MBI in Chicago. Did not pursue aviation, so I'll truncate that whole story.
Okay. You're in the jungles of the Amazon, and you go to Chicago.
Correct.
Not only was that a cultural shift for you significantly, but also a temperature shift, a climate shift significantly. What was that like for you?
If anybody knows anything about Moody Bible Institute, to this day, it is in the downtown of Chicago. Yeah. It is 600 North LaSalle.
Windy City, where that wind comes right off Lake Michigan, and it's biting cold.
It is 6 blocks north of the Loop. Now, they didn't have their aviation school there. At that time, they've changed since. This is 30-some years ago, right, Steve?
Yeah.
They had a flight school. So you do your 1 year of, this was back in the day, you did your 1 year Bible, and then you did your 4 other years of your Bachelor of Science. You got a, their whole argument was they were a feeder school for all these missionary aviation schools, or aviation ministries, MAF, JARS, name them all. But I did an aptitude test for the first time in my life, and it pretty much came back that and a second question that they were rightfully able to ask, which is, do you envision yourself flying a single-engine airplane into the hinterlands of the world? And I was like, nah, I like flying, but maybe not. So their whole thing was, you're probably better suited to, and ended up completing a Bachelor's of Arts with a multimedia photography emphasis, and ended up doing commercial photography in Chicago after I graduated.
How long were you in Chicago?
7, 8 years total.
And what were those years like?
To your point, it is the windy city, and I'm from the Amazon. You know, we're like 0.45 degrees off the equator.
Yeah.
And that made it very easy for me to decide I need to be like somewhere else.
Nice warmer climate.
And by the nature of us doing our home assignments in Scotland, it was very common to catch a flight to Miami. And so we had stopped in and visited the U.S. And so Orlando, or at least Florida, was an easy pick. I scouted South Florida. I even scouted Jacksonville. It was a bit like the Goldilocks story, you know, where this was muy caliente, this was a little too hot. Jacksonville was a little too quiet, and Orlando was right in the middle.
Yeah.
And so.
Were you single at the time?
I was married at the time.
How'd you meet your wife?
At school, at Bible college.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at the time you guys moved down here, any kids?
No kids.
Yeah.
No. So again, that wasn't a difficult decision to kind of do.
Where's your wife from?
Originally, so I'm on wife number 2.
Okay.
So she was originally from Pennsylvania, Reading, Pennsylvania area.
Yeah. And you come down here, still doing photography?
Correct. I was involved in the commercial photography scene, and had knew of, but did not have a friendship or relationship with the head of photography at Disney, and made that kind of connection, and ended up not doing stuff for them, ended up doing stuff for Universal Studios. The backstory was, in Chicago, what I was wanting to do was multimedia for missions. If you're a missionary kid and you have any parents that had to, every time they did a furlough or a home assignment, you had to tell your story. And inevitably, it was a matter of this mad rush in the last 6 months of your assignment to put together some kind of story. So I sat through my share of missionary missions conferences, and I knew that by and large, most of the stuff was substandard. So my imagination was, what if I could put together a media agency that would do media for missions on a third-party basis, because I would obviously use, marketplace companies to kind of carry the load, but be able to do some stuff. And I figured, again, Orlando was central enough that I could do Caribbean, South America, Europe stuff. It was a good jumping off point. It was still a good place to be able to kind of do some gigs.
Anything ever develop out of that?
Not really.
Yeah.
The majority of the answers I got from most mission agencies, regardless of how small or how large they were, was, that's a great idea. We have a phenomenal need for that. You've got a skill for that.
Why don't you raise money?
If you can raise money, if you can get to our candidates course by August, we might find a place for you. Oh, and I kept saying, I'm not saying something right, because essentially what I'm trying to do is be able to, I'll give you an example. Central America, there was an opportunity where we had 3 agencies. One was fairly advanced and wanted to do some, and this was early, again, this is 1994. This is a lifetime ago. Video was fairly new in terms of, most stuff was, at best, multi-projector slideshows. At worst, it was single, click, 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 tell your story, show a slide, tell your story, show a slide. And my thought was, what if I could do something pick a country, Central America, do a high-end video stuff for one client, also do something that was fairly general, and then do almost like stock images for a third, but be able to kill 3 birds with 1 stone. That was my marketing model back in the day. And to your point, majority of the answers was, hey, this might be something we're looking into, and you've got a skill set for this. If you can raise your support, if you can get to candidate school, we might be able to plug you in. And I'm like, that's not where we're going, Yeah. So that was the story with that.
So how long were you in photography?
In a profession, that probably lasted about 2 years. We had a friendship with a young couple at the church that we established ourselves with, and I guess her observation was, and her background was employee benefits. And her thing was, we're looking for enterprising people. Our agency is growing. You might be a good fit. And I'm like, the last thing on my mind was to do insurance or employee benefits. And I've been doing that for 27 years now. So that was the transition.
Yeah.
In terms of work-wise. I still noodle a little bit with my, my phone.
You're taking today. You were taking a whole bunch of pictures.
I still do. I guess I can't stop. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So
kids?
I've got two. Well, they're grown men now. I've got a 26-year-old and a 23-year-old. Two boys.
What are they up to?
My eldest is a firefighter. He just moved up last fall to Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And my youngest is in the Orlando area. He just graduated from college.
And then your bride?
Yes. So I'm remarried. My bride, who
I met her at, what was it, the Conclave 2 years ago?
Correct.
Yeah.
We had it on the docket. Her daughter graduated from college last year, so that kind of trumped that, and she graduated with a double major, so we went and yelled loudly for her at her graduation for that. And then ended up moving her to Boston, literally the 5 days that followed that, so yeah, didn't make it, but we're on the books for this next conclave. And
then the Orlando group, it's growing.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah.
And you guys are doing, I mean, really, of all the chapters around the nation, there are a handful that are really kind of flagship. Like, you guys are crushing it. And this is one that I'll see posts often where you guys are having smokes here, over at Corona, other places.
Right.
And
we have a standing one that's kind of the third Thursday. So again, anybody that is in town. But as you well know, Orlando tends to be, and this is happening even next week, tends to be a spot where folks will drop in for conferences or conventions. There's obviously a number of other ministries that are based here. So anytime somebody gives us a heads up and they're like, I'll be in town, we'll cobble something together for that. We're happy to do that.
That's beautiful. Andrew Lawson, let's get to rapid fire questions. Hey everyone, I wanted to announce that we have Holy Smokes gear. That's right, we have swag. We currently have hats, shirts, stickers like for your vehicle or your travel humidor, magnets, even branded bourbon glasses for a limited time. Go to holysmokes.club and click on the shop tab. That's holysmokes.club. I'm super proud of the shirts. They're made with Bella Canvas shirts that are soft and incredibly comfortable. The hats fit wonderfully, which can be a problem for those of us with big noggins. We plan on having a lot more to offer, like Guayabera shirts, additional t-shirt designs, beanies, polos, hoodies, cigar accessories, and much more. Check it out. And even if you don't make a purchase now, be sure to sign up for that email list, as I've thrown a couple big discount coupon codes for those exclusively on that list. So click the shop tab at holysmokes.club. Thanks. Rapid fire. Fire. Here. I've been out of it for so long that I've been forgetting to start the podcast.
All right, well, I don't want to do your job for you.
What you smoking?
I don't want to do your job for you.
So what are you smoking? You pulled out a special one you wanted to smoke for this one.
Oh, well, yeah, for you, absolutely. We go top shelf for you, Steve. This is an Alec Bradley Prensado. So this is a 96 rated.
I think I've had that before. And
yeah,
that's solid.
I recommend it.
When did you first try cigars?
That's something that I've been asked before. I kid you not. It was, so again, you know my background, missionary school. High school had 42 people in a high school. Everyone talks about graduating class of, how many hundreds. And there was
Mine had 55.
55? Well, there you go. That's rare that we find that. I'm used to sitting through how many hours of graduations, right? Mm-hmm. And there was a play that we did. I think it was called The Inspector General. I was the inspector. And one of the props that it called for was that he had to have a cigar. So I found some roached out cigar, in the backwaters of the Amazon. And that was my prop. And then this is the first time this is going public, but at the end of the play, I've got a cigar still that we've used for a couple of these performances. So we have to light that thing up. We got to put some fire on that thing. So I have absolutely zero memory of what that is, other than when somebody asks, what was your genesis of cigar experiences? That's what it was. I have no idea what it was. ended up doing a ton of stuff with work-wise. And I remember one particular business after hours that had a cigar lounge. It was a top deck kind of thing, and there was a cigar lounge below. So somebody did the whole, hey, let's go grab a cigar. And it was a La Gloria Cubana. That's the one I remember.
Yeah, I like La Glorias.
And I often quote, and I don't know if he gets credit for this, but he will tonight. Sigmund Freud affectionately says, this sometimes is just a prop. You know, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. And what Eric and I have found here with Holy Smokes Orlando is that it does two things. It gives you a reason to kind of push pause for 45 minutes, an hour and a half, and have what I hope is meaningful conversations other than, you know, we're not interested in sitting around TV and watching a football game or just having kind of inconsequential nonsense type talks. So to me, that's the power of what a cigar can sometimes do.
You ever do pipe?
I'm too young. I'm not old enough to be a pipe guy, I don't think.
Favorite cigar?
I just said this tonight, and we've got some cigar guys here that are far deeper down the rabbit hole than I. My experience has been, even if you hung on to, this is my favorite, if you are literally open, and especially if you do any cigar events, and we are in Orlando, boy, talk about an abundance, a buffet of plenty when it comes to cigar lounges or cigar people. I think I just posted probably within the week where if I get a bundle of a particular one that I like, I'm probably most interested in the ones I haven't tried yet. And if you're
kind of the same way.
Does that make sense?
I'm totally the same way. I mean, I'll have go-tos that I'll go back to.
Sure.
But I'm always down for trying something new.
And you'll recognize ones you're like, oh, that's a gooder. Like you smoked one earlier, and I'm like, ooh, that's a gooder.
Yeah.
But the idea of only and always on one particular one, I think is so limiting, in my opinion. And again, if you're remotely open to something different, you may find your new favorite.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's a holy smoker in Colorado Springs, Owen Hill. I don't know if you've ever met Owen on one of your trips, but I have asked him one time, I was like, what's your favorite cigar? The one I'm currently smoking.
Currently now. I mean, this is not a bad cigar.
Most expensive cigar you've ever smoked?
That's kind of an easy one. I've got a couple of those resting in my cigar humidor right now. A boutique brand from a gentleman in Winter Park, Florida. Not to be confused with Winter Park, Colorado, which I have yet to visit. And him and his partner, the name is Korban, which I believe is kind of Hebrew for smoke offering. That's the story I'm told, so I'm going to repeat that. And him and his partner sold their business with a lot of zeros after it. And their comment to each other, and mostly his particular partner, Jeffrey, insisted, look, we have celebrated the highs and lows of our business ventures with cigars. It's a bit like Winston Churchill insisting that, you know, you celebrate champagne for when you have your high moments, when you have your down moments, we'll have some champagne as well. And their argument was, it's not a financial issue anymore. Let's go on this crusade to find. And so they created their own cigar brand. And the story real quickly was Jeffrey had a connection with Nestor Plasencia, and he indulged them as a favor. And suddenly he's like, I think you boys are onto something. So it's a Korban. And the original one was, again, is sitting in my humidor, resting for the occasion that I think it deserves. So bottom line, you could only buy them in boxes of 10. They were $500 for a box of 10, which I think makes it $50 a stick. Yeah. And there are amazing sticks, cigars you can get that are certainly far less than that. Yeah. But I lit that one, enjoyed it thoroughly. Didn't have any hurry on that one.
Best dollar for dollar cigar?
That's a tougher question. Simply because, again, you can get some of these promos or specials. And I tend to be a Fuente fan. Had a chance to meet the Fuentes back in the day. And obviously, they've got a huge presence in Tampa. And Carlito, you talk about a figure and an ambassador in the cigar world. So I tend to like any of the Fuente stuff. The Opus X, of course, is kind of the creme de la creme. But yeah, again, I had a Plasencia the other day, and I'm like, boy, that is a meaty, toothy little little cigar, you know, the Alma Fuerte. It's a real strong one, Maduro. But if you just kind of are open to a couple things, like you said, and I'm generous when I will share something that I like with somebody, and the opposite is true. Somebody will say, have you tried one of these? So, yeah, be open about that.
Where's your go-to place to get your smokes?
My go-to, I always patronize, and we're big about trying to try out different shops, and if we find something new, next Thursday, Eric and I are both going to research. That's our joke. We joke we're going to go research a new place that just opened up, so they've got a grand opening on Thursday night. But like I said, in the Orlando, Central Florida area, there's a couple places. I'm a huge fan of Jeff Borsoitz and what he's doing. He's the owner of the Corona Cigar family, and he's got his own little plot, probably from here, Steve. It can't be more than 20 miles from here. It can't be 25 miles from here.
Yeah.
So here's a guy who did the whole, I'm not doing this for financial reasons when it comes to planting and having his own 20-acre farm. But yeah, Corona Cigars. We like a place in Sanford that has been incredibly hospitable to us called Executive. But
I was just there last night.
Fabulous. So yeah, we are blessed when it comes to spots to live, and which makes it a little tricky when you go and travel to other places and you're like, boy, the pickings are slim in whatever city you're in, right?
What's your splurge cigar?
Splurge, probably a high-end Fuente.
Favorite-
Opus X, Rare Pink, you know, if you're going to treat yourself to something.
Favorite liquid pairing with your smoke?
We just talked about my Scottish background, and Scotch is a newer taste for me. I've been in the U.S. since, late 70s now, so
Yeah.
I tend to find myself playing a lot with bourbon, and we had a couple of those yet this afternoon, so, and I make a pretty mean old-fashioned, so a little humble brag right there. So a bourbon and a good cigar, to me, that is just magical.
Most interesting person you've ever met through cigars?
Real quickly, I would go to Avo Uvenzian, who was a Orlando local back, towards the end of his day. He's passed away now, I believe 3 years ago, maybe 4. And he used to hold court down in the south side of town. And what an interesting individual when it came to his multiple careers, mostly music in the early days, and then cigars in the latter half of his days. So if you've ever had an Avo and you're wondering why they all have musical names to them, quick little tip you can look up later on. He picked up a little ditty that was not working in terms of a composition, and a young artist named Frank Sinatra was having trouble with the music that went along to the lyrics for a song called Strangers in the Night, and Avo said, here, let me have a chance to work on that, and the rest is history.
Most memorable cigar experience?
That's a little tougher. I had a chance to go to London. London's an interesting place, and had a cigar at the Carlton Club, which is the home of the Conservative Party in London. If you're familiar with some of these houses they have there. And that was only memorable because 2 hours before I got married at Westminster Abbey to my bride, Miss Janine. And so we celebrated with a Cuban cigar at the Carlton Club. We had our reception there.
Westminster Abbey.
That's wacky, isn't it? That's
How'd you get that done?
It's not possible, but
But how'd you get it done?
officiated, or at least overseen by the Dean of the Abbey.
Wow.
So that's a whole nother story unto itself. And I had a number
Let's hear
of...
it.
You want to hear it? You
Let's
want to
hear it.
You
Let's
got
hear it.
time?
Yes.
So a good colleague of mine who is also, I'm a chaplain and he is also a chaplain. And my simple ask to him was, scout out the Abbey. He had had a chance to meet my wife Janine, and he said, boy, she's a keeper. You need to marry her. And I said, absolutely, yeah. And I said, so here's the deal. Scout out the Abbey. His name was Bailey. Bailey, you and your wife will be there. And all we want to do simply is, you'll ask obviously a number of questions where the answer is I do, because I already knew. if you're not knighted or if you're not royalty, you're not getting married at Westminster Abbey. Don't even ask. And he quickly came back with this whole, well, about 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, he said, tell you what, I got an answer back from the dean of the Abbey, and he said no. And so I kind of scolded him. I said, dude, simple instructions were you were to scout out a spot where we could literally just kind of privately do something quietly, and you were not to involve the dean of Westminster Abbey. And so I'm a mule-headed character. I said, well, we're still going to press on with our plans. This was now 6 years ago. So a number of weeks later, I got another email from him because he was living in London at the time. He was just down from Westminster. He said, I got an email back from the personal assistant from the dean who said, as much as we've said kind of no to the wedding kind of thing, the marriage thing, we would be open to a rededication service. And I said, oh, absolutely. Given that we had a wedding in Florida, which kind of took care of the U.S. stateside paperwork, and we were also going to get married at Westminster Abbey. So changed the wording a little bit to our, and it had to be timed. They're like, we'll give you 10 minutes. We kept it to 7. And then even the day before, this PA, her name was Twiggy Strawbridge. If you cannot get more English than that, she had reached out to Bailey and said, didn't know this, sorry, you might want to change your plans. The organ at Westminster Abbey is going to be tuned on Tuesday, which is when you're scheduled to be here, or scheduled, as they say. Would you like to do it like later in the afternoon? And we had already had the 10 o'clock scheduled here and the lunch scheduled at Carlton Club. And we said, tell you what, we'll take our chances. It's only going to be less than 10 minutes, right? And so even getting there that day, I thought, we're going to either, it's a 50-50 chance. We're either going to be greeted by, how on earth did you pull this off? And he was delighted. It was the most amazing thing. And basically found a little private spot off to the side and then stood there the whole time. We thought, he's going to kind of open up a little cordon area and leave us be. And he stood there the whole time and essentially said, I haven't had this much fun in the longest time. And he just essentially kind of sat there and just kind of oversaw this thing, gave us a little blessing. And the Westminster Abbey, you cannot take photos. It is a house of prayer. So he said, if you don't mind excusing me, I have prayers at the top of the hour. And at 11 o'clock, he quieted everybody. By the way, this is Valentine's Day 6 years ago. So this is February 14th, which is an easy date for me to remember now, right? And essentially quieted everybody, had the most beautiful blessing for newlyweds, couples, and families. And then later found us, because I'm the only guy in full regalia kilt. Mm-hmm. My wife's, Janine's, in a beautiful gown, so we were easy to spot. And he said, tell you what, if you've got a minute, I have private prayers in this area that is off limits to the public, which is the original foundation of the Abbey. It's the Edward the Confessor altar, which is off limits for the simple reason it's been around since 1066, the Battle of Hastings. It's the original foundation of the Abbey. And of course, I was curious. I'm like, why is this off limits? And his simple answer was, pilgrims for centuries have been picking off relics and stealing gemstones and whatnot, so this is now not available to the public. We had private prayers with the Dean of the Abbey, and that was magical. You can't repeat that. You can't even order that.
You got in?
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. So at the end of this whole thing, he's like, do you have a camera? Which we're like, you're not allowed to have a camera, but in my sporran, which is the little pouch in front of my kilt, I had my phone, which clearly had a camera on it, and he took some photos of us. So we have pictures of us at that event. And then we headed off to the Carlton Club for our little reception.
Dude.
And then Cuban cigars in the garden after that.
That's awesome.
Isn't that wacky? And then, of course, I had all my relatives that were in England and Scotland wondering why they were not invited. We invited nobody.
All right, back to rapid fire.
Go.
Marvel or DC? Or neither?
Oh, neither.
Okay.
I'm not vested in either of them.
Star Wars or Star Trek?
Probably Star Wars. I mean, you can't help it when 50 miles south of you in Disney World is an entire empire, right?
Into sports?
Avid non-sports guy.
Favorite kinds of music?
I like smooth jazz. I like bossa. Being born and raised in Brazil, I'm a big fan of bossa, João Gilberto Jobim, and that whole kind of lyrical sound.
Favorite bands, like from when you were in college?
That would have to be U2.
Favorite food?
Well, that's easy. If you said Indian or Chinese or Mexican, I would say yes. Yes is the answer to food.
Dogs, cats, neither, or both?
Dogs, although I don't mind cats. I can't eat a whole one anymore. So if you're into cats, we can share recipes or anything, but...
Nickname growing up or in college?
I was called Andy in high school, which is only funny because my sister still calls me that, and I'm like, I haven't been Andy for 30, 40 years, you know?
What's one unusual fact that few people know about you?
Oh, that's a gooder. This one may come up to haunt me, but I have military papers from 2 different branches of the armed services, from 2 different countries, from 2 different continents.
Favorite 1 to 3 books not titled the Holy Bible?
Huge Winston Churchill fan. So any of the biographies written by Winston Churchill, I like his answer because Winston Churchill said, history will be very favorable to me because I will write it.
I intend to write it.
I intend to write it. So he wrote, how many, 2 autobiographies? But boy, what a unique, singularly unique individual for his time. But to this day, I cannot stop quoting Churchill.
You have a life scripture?
Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 has always guided me, you know, in all your ways. The idea of, and we just had this discussion, didn't we? Pretty animated discussion down there where you commit your paths for the simple reason that the one singular known or the one singular certainty is the Lord. I may have plans, imaginations, and preferences, but at the end of the day, I hold those pretty loosely. In all your ways, commit your plans to the Lord, and He will direct your paths.
Name 3 things that you are thankful for at this time in your life.
Incredibly grateful for my wife, daily. The ability, again, to presume that I will always enjoy the camaraderie of believers. Holy Smokes, I think, captures that more than I've experienced in any other adult experience, where you have the ability to have such like-minded, godly folks. They're not all the same. I mean, you look at our little band of brothers that met this afternoon, and that is true of almost all the time that we do group. So that'd probably be number 2, health. I'm a licensed life and health agent, so when I'm helping claims and whatnot, it brings right to the front the ability to know that I'll do what I can, but again, God will tell you whether you get another day, another breath.
If you could be any animal, what would you be?
A tiger. Who don't love a tiger, right?
Are you an early riser, a night owl, or kind of average?
I'm running both, and maybe that's not the best. I'll get up and kind of get at stuff, but I certainly don't look at the clock and say, hey, you know, got to wrap things up.
If you could live anywhere, where would that be?
I love Orlando, Florida. I've got the freedom to kind of, in all candor, live wherever I want. I'm fluent in Portuguese, so I could live in Brazil, live in Portugal, or I speak enough Spanish doing what I do, but I like Orlando, Florida. The free state of Florida, there's kind of nothing like it, right?
What's your greatest strength and what's your greatest weakness?
Undyingly loyal is my greatest strength. And then I check that, the shadow side of that is in a lot of the relationships. I find myself doing this recently, especially with clients or some of the other relationships. I think there's a movie that was called, you know, She's Not That Into You. So if I find that clients, there's no reciprocity, I tend to mirror them. So again, that's probably a weakness in the sense of a lot of times they might need or want me to kind of lead a little bit more, but I tend to mirror them, so.
Who's been the greatest influence in your life?
I found myself very involved in men's ministry. This is a version of it, I suppose. I kind of ran a men's ministry here in Orlando for a number of years. And I've heard this expression that, the folks you spend a lot of time with greatly influence you. So, and I have a passion for men from a leadership perspective and from just, being able to do their best work, God-given. And so that's intentional. And there's some great guys here, I think, who are doing it better. So they've challenged me literally within the last 5 days to kind of sharpen my sword.
Ooh. Who's the first person you think of when you hear the word successful?
That's a bit of a loaded question, Steve. Only because this idea of success, certainly in this Western world, in the U.S. culture, is absolutely one thing. I heard the word, which I like a lot this afternoon, which is how to be present. So how to be literally fully alive, how to be present, and that involves listening. I find myself not that interested in what I have to say because I kind of already know what I think and what I have to say, but the idea of how do I be present? And so to me, I think finding what matters most to others and the ability to kind of address that or speak to that, to me that would be success. We joked about this earlier, I don't have these goals, these metrics, these analytics that say, if I were to reach this number, but how can I have a lasting impression with my sons? How can I have a lasting impression? How can I do something that is eternal? I think I said this earlier, so you can quote me on this one. The two things that remain is the Word of God and souls. So what am I doing that really pours into those two metrics if I'm going to measure anything?
Yeah. How do you want to be remembered?
I'm not that particular about that.
Last three. What does Holy Smokes mean to you, and how has it contributed to your spiritual journey?
Holy Smokes is such a unique thing because the ability for you to have meaningful conversations, and in some cases substantial, kind of drilled down deep conversations. And so how that contributes is, it's like a plumb line. How do you kind of keep dialing in or tacking in, if you want to use sailing, boating terms, how do you kind of keep adjusting? And I'm at the point now where I'm very open. I've done this in the last 5-7 days where I'll ask folks to give me a real read on, whatever they observe, or if I have some wingnut idea, what do you think? Yeah. So Holy Smokes gives me the ability to do that. Arguably, more so in the one-on-ones. To me, I value that far greater in the ones and two type conversations versus the larger convenings, which we'll always have. Those tend to kind of bring in some of the marginal or the fringe type folks, but then the ability to have substantial conversations.
If you could have a holy smoke with any three people throughout history, living or deceased, who would they be? Can't name Jesus or Winston Churchill.
Oh, come on! Winston Churchill was out of control, and I'm not trying to top that guy. Jordan Peterson.
Okay.
And I know Dennis Prager smokes, so that would be an easy one. If I could have a cigar, I consider Dennis Prager my favorite rabbi. And he would probably argue that he's not a rabbi, but that man is wise, and I value Dennis. I've had a cigar with Dennis Prager, so that was two. Jordan Peterson, who is an unbelievable philosopher, thinker, teacher.
Yeah.
Dennis Prager. Do I have to pick a third one?
Yes.
I'm having a cigar with you right now. I've been looking forward to this for a while, so there you go. There's three right there.
And then Winston Churchill. All right.
Throw him in.
I'll give it back to you.
Thank
I'll give
you.
it back to you.
Thank you very much.
So I can sit at the table with Jordan Peterson and Dennis Prager and Winston Churchill.
And the ghost of Winston Churchill.
All right, last question. If we're to meet 1 year from today, and I got a bottle of your favorite scotch, since you're getting into scotch.
Yeah.
What are we celebrating?
What are we celebrating? We're drinking Oban.
Oban.
Yes. My favorite uncle is in Oban.
Okay.
West Highlands. Just, it's the little port town that runs you off to pick a ferry, and so we're going to go to Oban, which is how it's pronounced, by the by. And what are we celebrating? I have a business venture that we're noodling on that literally will come alive any day now. So hopefully that little business venture has launched and it's out the gate. I'd like that to be the case a year from now.
Andrew Lawson, thanks for being on the Holy Smokes podcast.
My pleasure, Steve. Looking forward to this so much.